Szanowni Państwo, zaczynamy nasz panel dyskusyjny. Welcome.
Let's start with the discussion panel.
On the stage, Professor Paul Krugman, Professor Yochanan, proszę bardzo, take a seat. And Professor Konrad Raczkowski, prorektor do spraw finansowych.
And Professor Raczkowski, Deputy Rector at the Cardinal Wyszyński University in Warsaw, an economist, and I have the honor to moderate this panel. I will try to do the moderation in English, while the questions can come in Polish or English, like our interpreters are working into their respective languages.
Mr. Professor, you said about European history, which was not easy, about war, about pandemic, about crises, about demography problems, about inflation. But you said you are not a pessimist. In some matters, Europe achieved better success than USA. But all of us know that sun doesn't shine every day, that after the summer times come winter time and difficult times. So my question for you is what Europe, what especially Poland, should do not to lose their position. What can be wrong? What can be dangerous for us? Please tell us.
Okay. So the first thing to say is that the old-fashioned issues of national security are back, and that the clearly the United States has been lecturing Europe on the need for bigger defense budgets for a long time. I know that Poland is one of the good guys on this, but the rest of Europe definitely does need to realize that this is not the end of history world where conflict no longer arises. I would say that there's a lot to be said for limited, targeted industrial policies. We have gone very heavily towards the neoliberal view that markets trust the markets, and there's still it's easy to go too far in the opposite direction, but it really does look as if green technology, which Yochanan talked about some, that we've had a number of illustrations that creating a critical mass for new technologies can really be helpful. And beyond that, you're going to need revenue, and possibly. I mean, in the United States, I'm very much we need more social expenditure. For much of Europe, that is not true. And yes, France needs to raise the retirement age. So there are. It's fairly. There's no one single thing. No silver bullet, but just a variety of sensible, responsible, but politically difficult policies.
So my next question is for Professor. Okay, przepraszam bardzo. For Professor Shachmurove, you said about Green Deal. Some of us, especially in Poland, but not only in Poland, in Germany also, we are afraid about Green Deal because we are afraid not to lose our position. What should we do in Europe? What is an alternative? European Green Deal is the only way or not?
I think you should cooperate because you have many countries which are advanced, but again, you need to look at China, which is a big player in this green technology and innovations and patents and investment in healthcare, and now they are building their own airplanes. You need to look at these industries with some kind of increasing return to scale that Paul Krugman mentioned, in his work, in order to have the rent, in order to be able to accomplish and do research. And again, you look at Nokia in Finland, a small country, and you look at Poland, and you don't see Poland as a leader in innovations, in something that, you say, wow, this is a place where we should invest. So you need to look around, and I think Paul already mentioned that sometimes you want to target some industries, and the Chinese are doing very well in this respect. Maybe contrary to what we teach, that tariffs should be equalized, and all the subsidies should be with the same rate, and so on. We are in front of a revolution in the AI and other area, and we need to be the leader rather than waiting or watching and following Germany or following Taiwan or whatever. Look at Taiwan, how good they are doing relative to, Poland or relative to France or Germany and so on. So my point is cooperate and use your resources and don't buy only Paul's ideas. Try to get innovations and use exactly what the Chinese are doing. There are thousands of people when I go to China almost every year now, and I see all of those people designing new hospitals, designing new cars, designing new airplanes, and all of those are people that are not Chinese. So again, my point is cooperate, but be forceful. Invest in it. It's required to bring people in, and it requires to cooperate and do more. That's my point.
Does really Green Deal is real innovation, or is an item which could destroy our position? I mean, European position, economy position.
I don't think so, because you have problems of energy, right? And one of the possibilities is to use new technology in order to alleviate these problems of energy shortage. You have a problem maybe with food shortage. Poland is agricultural country, big country, and so on and so on, but still, the prices of grain, the prices of cotton, the prices of every agricultural commodities is going up dramatically. I didn't show it. I have slides on it, and you can see that it's very important to lead rather than to wait. And you can learn from the US example. Yes, I agree that some of the subsidies for wind strategy and so on collapsed once the subsidies went to zero in California. But again, go back and study these cases and see where we failed and where you can do better. And again, you want to diversify your risk. In other words, cooperate. So not only Poland will suffer the risk if it will fail, but also other countries. And as a result, you invest more in technology, you invest more in research, you will get results. I don't want to mention, nuclear power or whatever, but when the world decided that you need a nuclear bomb, people got together and they deliver. And I think Polish universities and American universities should cooperate in this respect, rather than sending us for 2-3 days. That's not the way to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Krugman, would you like to add anything?
Oh, let me just say on the general, generally the kind of green policy stuff, there is a particular issue. I mean, the United States has moved to subsidies for green industries, and which are nationalistic, had to be as a matter of the politics of it. But there is definitely room in terms of cooperation. I think that this is a situation where we could have a lot of reciprocity, where countries, where we all agree that we're going to try to push for the green transition, and we also agree there are going to have to be some limits. You're not going to be able to sell these subsidies if people perceive them as subsidizing jobs in China. You can lecture me on the advantages of free trade and so on. It's not going to matter. It's worth remembering that the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is our major green initiative, passed the US Senate with a margin of 0 votes. was a tied vote with the vice president casting the side. So, and it wouldn't have passed at all without the jobs. But to be able to say, okay, allied friendly countries are also eligible for these subsidies, provided that we are eligible for their subsidies. I think that's a deal that could be made. And so I think there's a real possibility. Actually, since I'm talking too much, let me add one more thing. If you have any doubts that pushing a technology can generate critical mass and cause people to adopt it. Nobody talks about this as an industrial policy because it wasn't deliberate. But remote work, we had the capacity to do it. We've had it for a number of years, but it took a pandemic. Suddenly everybody had to use it. Now we've returned to normal life, except it turns out that a large part of the workforce productively works in a way it didn't before. And this can apply to a lot of things.
Thank you very much. Nasz kolejny panelista jest...
And now on to our next panelist, Paul. Professor, let me ask in Polish. And I'm asking about the Green Deal for a reason, because we are just a few days before the first considerable energy price rise in Poland, not really resulting from the Green Deal, but resulting from the end of the economic shield post-COVID. So what is your approach to it? You're a well-experienced practitioner and a scientist. Do you think that the concerns about the Green Deal are substantiated? Because some say it could undermine the position of European economy, and that European households will suffer. We remember it from the People's Republic of Poland times, when a vast majority of our households were really poor. Is this going to be a reality in Europe over the next decade, or are those concerns and fears largely exaggerated? If they are,
which language
why?
to choose to answer the question, but I'm from Poland, I'm from Warsaw, so maybe I should speak in Polish when my colleagues have micro and everything is translated in English. Przejdę na polski.
So let me switch to Polish.
Ja się bardzo cieszę z tego, co Paul Krugman powiedział.
I really welcome what Professor Krugman said about the European values and the crisis we've been facing for the past 40 years for the European Union in its entirety. Many were concerned that the European Union would come to an early end. But there were 4 crises as of the 1970s, I would say even 5. But this is all very true, and it's a very good evaluation. I very much welcome it, but I've got certain concerns. Because we are closer to Brussels, so here's the way I see it. The European project of the Green Deal is for sure an interesting one, and we know where it comes from. It was supposed to be a booster, like, if you like, the New Deal back in the day in the US. It was supposed to stimulate the European economy, but it's not really what's happening, because 90% of the so-called eco manufacturing mentioned here by Professor Shachmurove, it will contribute to the GDP of China. So here's the question, coming back to R&D. Where is our R&D that will stimulate European companies? Not so long ago, Siemens, Volkswagen and Bosch nearly declared bankruptcy, and they had to be subsidized by the German government considerably for their mere survival. So over a very short time, we've seen a major shift, which is quite unprecedented since many years, and we have to react to that. Whenever I talk to the European CEOs, they always tell me that without the adjustment of the Green Deal, we are not going to survive. Maybe that is why we are now opening in France, the US, Germany and Poland, because our president is just back from China, to the global collaboration. This is global decoupling we are witnessing, where there's a clear attempt to achieve the following. If Europe stays as it is and does nothing, I know that Paul Krugman said that we shouldn't observe nominal values because at the end of the day they are not that important, especially if we leave out the UK, and we know that previously the data included the UK. So I think it deserves an asterisk without the UK because it's still sizable as an economy. India was freed from British colonialism only in 1947, as did Pakistan and Bangladesh. So, if you look at all these changes happening for decades, this very change we are talking about is happening as we speak over a span of just a few years. So I think we really need an adjustment. You ask about costs. The costs will be exorbitant. They are now included in the already passed directives. In the case of single-person households, houses, many of them were built for years in Central and Eastern Europe, about 1,500 square feet in size. The cost will be $80,000 to $90,000 per one household, and no subsidies to speak of. If anything, 5 to 10%. So, where on earth should we take such money from? And it will be obligatory to say more. So, if we do not make this expenditure in the years to come, it won't lead us anywhere. Poland has no history of prosperity building, so where are we supposed to take this prosperity from? The richer countries, the UK and France, for instance, how are they supposed to spend this money if they no longer have it? They used to have it. I remember living in London for several years. I really love the UK, beautiful country. I visit every year. But now, when I think that 18 million of citizens of the UK have to choose whether they pay electricity bills or buy food, I say something is very wrong. I think we should analyze the Green Deal like we analyze any investment project in the bank. When we approach the bank for a loan, nobody gives you any loan if you don't show them any collateral or exit strategies and profit-making strategies. Well, so far we have yet to see this other side of the Green Deal. I hope it will be developed very soon with the right adjustment to stimulate investment. I'd say through subsidies. And then the public debt going up will be well substantiated if it serves innovation, translating into higher value added. Just a short question, Professor. Bogdan Rymanowski has this yes or no TV show, so please tell me yes or no, or what kind of adjustments are you thinking about to make us secure or to make us innovative enough to push Polish or European economy to new waters. Well, let me put it this way. Let's not get cross with China. We have to collaborate with our biggest partner, the US, but we have to collaborate with China too. And if recently they developed 6 nuclear power plants over the past few years in Pakistan, it's an unprecedented pace. So maybe it's worthwhile to change the law and alleviate some bureaucracy in the European Union, because this is still a barrier for development. What we need most in Europe is cheap energy. We have to invest 80% of our resources into energy, because if we don't have energy or cheap energy, there won't be any companies in Europe, and we'll get only poorer. If we spend the vast majority of our disposable income on energy. We've recently seen several 100% price raises for energy in Poland. These are facts. And looking at the said facts, I'd say no matter what the European member states, everybody looking at the energy bills would like to wake up and be wise about what you're going to do.
Decoupling is a chance for us, or dangerous? Can be dangerous for Europe? Should we cooperate with China? Should we make some changes in Green Deal or not?
Okay, I think I disagree, though I'm not sure whether it's an actual disagreement or not. But I would say 2 things. First, the adaptability of advanced economies is enormous. We can say, look, energy is really critical, and it is, but there are lots of ways that you can shift the use, shift the sources, in some cases conserve energy given the incentives. And let's not forget that we are in a moment of, we've had a technological revolution in energy. Certainly on electricity generation, we're now in a situation where renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels for new plants. So that it's now the hard part is actually dealing with uses. Basically electrifying the economy and dealing with the intermittency issues. But we've also, it turns out, had a technological revolution in batteries, which people didn't really see coming, but also transforms that. So I don't think that this is, now, right now, China has a lot of this technology, and so there's reasons to buy it from China, and we can critique, I mean, the United States is doing a lot of forcing sourcing of green technologies domestically, even though it's more expensive, and there are reasons for doing that, but it's not clear that this is that hard a problem. So I actually am not, I don't think that there is I think fundamentally technology and science have given us the opportunity of moving to a green economy at far less cost than anyone had previously imagined.
What I will, the feelings that I have from this discussion is like there is a Polish side and the American side. The Poles looks, as far as I understand, as you are worried to take, risk and invest in this new technology. And again, I think I identified before the sectors. Look for sectors that have increasing return to scale, and in this way invest, buy technology from China. There is no reason, Paul may agree or not, we will see in a minute, there is no reason to put 100% tariff on vehicle from China, electric vehicles and so on and so on. This is not the way to go, the way I was educated. The way to go is to compete, to invest, to talk to students, to teach them energy, to teach them chemistry, forget maybe for a few years about humanities. I know that people will not like what I'm saying. But the point is, we are at war. And at war, you need to invest, and you need to prepare for the next war. And the next war is, you really don't want that all your product will come from China. You don't want that you will, go only, I don't know, agricultural commodities and have land reforms. We cannot go back. We need to continue. We need to take risk. And don't worry, the technology will find itself. We talked about battery and we talked about electric vehicle, but there is hydrogen, and I know at the University of Warsaw, I'm on a group that is working on hydrogen investment and so on, using some research and development there. The technology is, we can grasp it. I'm not saying that we are under X-Shaolin where you can buy all the technology, and I'm sure the Chinese will not sell what they have, but still, there is enough market for reforms, enough market for innovation, that we can buy some technology and adopt it. The sooner the better, rather than saying, okay, green economy is something that will be, postponed for the future, and in the meantime use coal and so on, which maybe Poland has relative to other countries. But again, the coal industry is going to disappear sooner than later, and better prepare today. And use, I don't know what you can use. Wind, of course, you can use it in Poland, right? There is no reason not to do it. So you go, I don't know, I went in Spain and in Romania even, and you can see all of these windmill, and you don't see so many of them in Poland, as far as I can say.
Thank you, Mr. Professor. Panie profesorze Raczkowski, może to nie chcę nic sugerować, ale
Professor Raczkowski, not that I'm suggesting anything, but maybe this is the right moment to explain to our international guests that we are not just afraid to invest in new technology. We are just afraid to have another era of poverty. We are hardly affected by the First World War, the Second World War, then 50 years of communism. So we've had our fair share of poverty. And our experience is much harder than in the case of Western Europe, like France and Spain. And I think our concerns are real. But it's not like we are afraid to invest in new technology at large. Thank you, Professor Krugman, for coming and enlightening us. I'd like to thank Professor Shachmurove too. I think this is quite exquisite that you're here. At this day and age, there is one idea for Europe. Because ideas were born here for years. 83% of the globe used to belong to Europe once. So it's high time we started thinking in ideas, and I very much welcome this debate here. After what you said, I'd say that statistically speaking, China had the biggest transformation in terms of improving life quality over the past 2.5 decades. They improved it by 30 times. Poland improved it 9 times. In Europe, we also have Ireland, number 7 when it comes to life quality index improvement. By 1989, in Poland, there was no wealth to speak of, because how were you supposed to accumulate capital in the socialist system? But I think hard times make hard and driven people. And we have very driven people. And I very much welcome the way we went through our transformation after 1989.
So the German economy is 34th largest in terms of handling the difficulties, and the US is the 24th, where the Polish economy is second on that count. Professor Krugman discussed how long we live for. In order to talk about the economy, you need to be alive, and this average life duration in the US is lower by 2.5 or 3 years than in Europe on average. So, we've really got this mix that we need to combine here. And over the years, the fact of Europe's fragmentation into smaller states made progress possible. So it makes sense to maintain that as a value for the EU. Of course, cooperation is what we should build, but we must also lay down new ideas and solutions that are based on data. Then we have what to discuss. And basically, I know two key concepts. Well, I know a lot of concepts, but there are two key concepts about the future of the world. EU coalescing around the Green Deal and Harari's concept about what the world is supposed to be like. But now comes the question, do we only have two concepts? Are we not able to lay down one or two more to discuss and choose from? That was an interesting aside.
Left, so we don't have much time. I have my question, of course, because we are waiting for Q&A sessions. Krótkie pytanie dla wszystkich naszych panelistów.
So a short question to all our panelists.
How to increase European competition? How to speed up European growth? And especially how Poland can be the leader, as you told us in your lectures. Please, Mr. Krugman.
Okay. There is a dirty secret here, which is that economists don't know very much about how to accelerate growth. We know a lot about how to fight recessions and how to control inflation, but accelerating growth is really a bit of a mystery, more than a bit of a mystery. But we do know, there are two things. There's, what do we actually know? What we actually know is that over the very long term, investing in children is a very high return form of public investment. Making sure that children don't live in poverty, that they have adequate nutrition and health care, pays huge dividends, 20 years down the road, but that works. And the other thing is that you try to invest in infrastructure is too narrow a term. I think maybe we can say industrial ecosystems. Try to think of it that way. Try to invest in both the public aspects and encourage the private aspects that help develop things. That's what we've seen about manufacturing success stories, is that it's not an individual firm, it's not an individual national champion. It's a group of related firms that complement each other. How much difference that can make, it's very, very hard to devise policies that will reliably add more than a few tenths of a percentage point to your growth rate. But you do what you can.
Bardzo dziękuję.
I don't know.
Thanks
I'm not
so
sure
much.
I can add more to Paul Krugman. My point is maybe education not only when you are very young, but also education at the university level. And again, the system in Poland, the way I see it, many of the students that I'm sometimes teaching here at University of Warsaw and in Torun, and what I find that not all students are really committed for studying. We have many people that, you can claim that 10 years ago, the level of mathematics, the level of physics and chemistry was much higher. Students were very serious. You got homework, you work. You need to do it. Chinese are doing it. Follow the Chinese. Follow the. I don't know. I was born in Israel, a small country, but were able to deliver and become a leader in technology, a leader in startup, and I don't see it enough here because I feel like, you're stopping. You have the possibilities, but you are afraid. You mentioned before, Second World War II, we suffered, we went through poverty. All of us were poor 20 years ago, 40 years ago. I don't know about everyone here, but of course, when people were leaving Europe and coming to a new country and, with no infrastructure and so on, you were worried. Now, Paul Krugman already told you, infrastructure is not what we understand, bridges and so on, even though the Chinese did very well in China as far as this infrastructure, physical infrastructure. But we are talking infrastructure of technology, infrastructure of your school. You need to teach innovation, you need to teach entrepreneurship, you need to teach that failing is okay. You know, out of 100 startups, only 1 or 2 will survive. But that's where the benefit will come. You have to do it. You have to risk, you know, put your reputation, put your education, put your everything that you know. And relatively speaking, the polls are working. Well, at least my friends, when I call them at 6 a.m. or at 11 p.m., they are still working. They are still online. They are still doing. That's exactly what you see in the United States. And this is the way to go. Whereas in Germany, they work 4.5 days and they are happy. When you're talking about the Northern Europe, people are valuing more leisure and so on and so on. I'm not against it. I'm just saying that you are now in a position where if you start going on vacation and going leisurely and study, I don't know, some other important topics which are not relevant to the growth of the economy, you are going to suffer. Because again, you need to invest in pharmaceutical, you need to invest in environmental, you need to invest in building plants, you need to invest in building other stuff that maybe I don't know what it's called, right? Who knows, who knew about Microsoft, who knew about Apple? You need to find your niche, you need to find your comparative advantage and do it as soon as possible, rather than being afraid poverty. We all were poor. We all lived in an apartment of 40 square meters. But of course, today we have 200. And the question is, what do you want to do with it? Do you want just to sleep there, or do you want to innovate and work? That's my lesson to all of us, including myself.
Thank you for such words. Thank you for your receipt. It's better to stay tough guys than to be lazy numb. Thank you. Panie profesorze, jak pan to widzi na
Professor, what's your perspective? I'm very sorry that the economists are not able to foresee the future, but perhaps you do, and perhaps you do have a solution for Poland to remain the leader of very good information and trends, or what else we should do to keep up these trends even more. Well, in a group of professors, us sitting here, even yesterday over dinner, we called some colleagues in Poland and abroad, and regardless of the time, and in their respective time zones, everybody picked up the phone and was working. That's the truth. And one of the nice speeches at the end of this academic year inauguration, delivered by Denzel Washington, had this quote:
"Hard work works. Working really hard, it's what successful people do." Przejdę na polski. Problem polega w tym, że
and the problem now is that nobody wants to work hard anymore in Europe. After the pandemic, I can see, and I'm used to the 24/7 working mode as a normal thing, but I'm leaving time aside for my private life. I do, or at least I'm trying to. But after the pandemic, it's difficult to find people who would like to come in and deliver on an ad hoc project. It's Friday afternoon, and there is this thing that is needed on a Monday morning. But, oh, it's a problematic, I need a double rate. Oh, sit on your ass and just do it, otherwise we'll replace you. That's what I do, and if somebody is not willing to work, let's not force them. After the pandemic, we find it somewhat difficult. The young generation would love suit jobs, but not the responsibility. They'd love to live off capital, but not earn that capital to buy these houses and rent them out. The issue is this machine generating money Well, it's not where the money originates. It does not grow in the ATMs. You need to work to have it. And our yesterday's discussion indicated that, for instance, the conversion in the US, like out of working in a university, means that either you're great or you're inadequate. And if you're inadequate, you drop out. There's no middle. And I guess this should be a lesson for us, to not get too drunk on the past 3 stable decades, not sit with your 200 square meter apartment now, but continue doing the hard work. Thanks so much. We have several academics around. They were smiling when you were speaking. Probably their experience of the youth is similar. But we are a bit more experienced, so it's our role to shift their worldviews.
We have time for some questions. I don't know how many. Please show me. Okay, pytań jest bardzo dużo. Mam nadzieję, że
There's so many questions out there, so if you could please ask these questions fast. The mic is here, so if you'd like to ask them, please do, and please introduce yourselves at the start, so that our guests know who they're speaking to. They may adjust their answers then accordingly. Ireneusz Dąbrowski, Warsaw School of Economics and National Bank of Poland. This discussion seemed to miss, however interesting it was, it seemed to miss 2 topics I'd like to raise. The first, Eurozone problem. Poland is obliged by the EU treaty to enter that zone, but there's no deadline on that. If you could please share your opinions on the opportunities and threats related thereto. Second thing, commenting on what Professor Raczkowski said, the new ideas. Well, for hundreds of years, we used to believe in the intermarium. We even implemented that idea. The Republic of Two Nations was 1 million square kilometers overall, Poland and Lithuania, the kingdoms. Are you even aware of the intermarium idea? President Trump supported it very strongly. And what is your opinion on that? Thank you.
I don't know what the intermarium is, so I will not respond to that one. The euro, I was and remain skeptical about the euro. There are some advantages to the simplicity of a single currency, but there's also major loss of flexibility. If we look at after the capital flows basically came to a stop in 2009, requiring major adjustments in prices and wages. Countries that had their own currencies made that adjustment basically in a day by devaluing their currencies. Countries that were on the euro, like Spain and Portugal, spent years of grinding high unemployment to make that adjustment. And also the euro creates the problem I mentioned, which is the speculative runs to which you cannot respond if you don't have your own currency. And Europe was saved from the worst of that by the leadership basically of one man, of Mario Draghi. And I'm not sure that you can always count on having that kind of leadership. So I always thought that the euro was an idealistic vision. It was meant to be a symbol of European unification, but in the end has probably set back European integration by the stresses that it created. But I know that that's very much if I were to say this in Brussels, people would start yelling at me.
Well, I agree with Paul. The point is, as long as you don't have fiscal adjustment, that the fiscal policy of each country within the euro will have the same policy, then of course it's not going to work. And of course, I supported Poland by going on its own currency, and of course it proved itself better in this respect, so I appreciate it. To respond to the question, the person says something like, we didn't talk about many topics, so I don't know if Philip will allow us, we can just project topics that I was putting just as a preparation for today, and in the meantime, I'm sure Konrad can respond to the questions.
We will need to join the Eurozone at some point, so it's not a question of whether we join it, it's a question of when we join it. So, to my mind, I agree with both the professors here that we need some adjustment mechanisms, both on the level of monetary policies and fiscal policies that Yochanan mentioned. And that's what we are doing. There is this unwritten rule. There's no formal document stating it, but central banking in the EU, that is the Eurozone plus central banks of the non-Eurozone member states, implement these adjustments. This is the new gold standard that, to my mind, is to be on the level of 4% of GDP. That is the reserves at the European Central Bank ultimately need to be kept at least on this level. The US is a good example here. Their reserves are much higher, but when Germany demanded their gold to be returned, it turned out pretty problematic to even find out whether this gold is physically in the Fed treasuries. And the return was only effected following lengthy political discussions, turmoil and time, while German controllers were not let into the treasuries to see their gold there. That's also interesting. Why is that the case even? But, well, we're moving on. And when talking about this first question, well, some time ago, yes. Now, we're way more competitive, staying out of the Eurozone for now, as Poland. Even though there would be some upsides to being in the Eurozone already, but just like some of the colleagues said, a CEO of a multinational, well, how would you compete with us if in Islamic banking we cannot collect interest on loans at all due to our religion? Then how come your projects would come at a 12% interest rate? Where is the competition here?
So just for a second, just to respond to you, you can see that I was thinking at least on many of the topics that we can talk about. I don't want to repeat all of them. Energy crisis, aging of the population, robots replacing labor, AI replacing laborers, electric vehicles, immigration. We didn't talk enough about immigration today, and it's all in fragmenting the population. Environmental issues, Ukraine, Russia, which we mentioned a little bit, defense spending, potential force recruitment to the army, identity theft and its effect. Those are real issues that we need to talk about. Disappearing of bank tellers, disappearing maybe of banks, the way we know it, the role of NATO, which is very important for Poland, the role of the WTO, which in the last 2 years, 3 years is not doing very well, and so on and so on, and China and so on. But the point is that I want to raise is the following. The rule was like 60% GDP, government expenditure to GDP, 3% deficit of government deficit, and so on and so on. All of these rules, quote unquote, Germany was the first one in 2008, 2009 to say forget about it, right? And then when coronavirus came, they were willing and adapting correctly, you know, from policy point of view, to forget about all of these rules. Rules are good under stable conditions. When they are different, so again, we go to Kidland and Prescott and their papers, policy is important, rules are important, but sometimes you need to deviate from the rules. And that's exactly what Europeans did, and that's why, you know, the situation is better. Is it really better when people are unemployed? No, of course not. And we need to deal with this youth unemployment. That's my point.
I just want to say a word. There is this European... One place where I think North America can teach Europe a lesson. There's this country that people tend to forget exists called Canada. That is right next to the United States. If you look at the distribution of population and economic activity, it's actually closer to the United States than it is to itself, because it's all spread in a narrow band across the top of the United States. And it has its own currency, and it manages. The idea that you must adopt the euro to be part of Europe is I mean, there are arguments pro and con, but the idea that this is an unavoidable decision is parochial. There are other places in the world that manage just fine with intense trading partners that have different currencies.
Proszę bardzo.
Thank you very much for the fascinating lectures and the very insightful discussion. It was a real pleasure and an honor for me to be able to participate in this event today. I would like to ask 3 questions. Firstly, I was particularly captivated by the international comparisons in macroeconomic performance between the United States and Europe. However, one possible question which I think might be worth considering in this respect is to what extent are we treating Europe, the European Union, or even the Eurozone as a monolithic entity, and are there significant discrepancies in performance and fundamentals affecting macroeconomic performance across different economies, even within the Eurozone itself? I was thinking here specifically of comparing, for example, the Northern European countries, Scandinavian countries, which do have extensive social security networks and provide a high quality of life, but also have relatively strong, competitive, flexible economies, whereas the situation in Southern Europe seems much less optimistic at the moment, given, yes, they do have a strong social safety net and some preference for redistribution, but their competitiveness and their prospect for growth, as we have seen, the 25% youth unemployment, could these discrepancies potentially pose a threat to the cohesion of the European political and economic community? The second question which I wanted to ask is there really no reason to be worried about which country develops new technologies? Because that is an argument which was stated that once the technology is developed, practically all advanced economies with similar capacities will be capable of adopting it, and the internet did come to Europe, and now it's better in Europe than in the United States in many respects. But from a microeconomic perspective, isn't there a question of what's known as innovation rents? If let's say, an American company develops a new technology and has a patent on it, or just enjoys some degree of monopoly power selling that product and sells it in Europe, sells the price above marginal cost, that margin accrues to the shareholders of the American company, presumably mostly Americans, at the expense of the European consumers. So I don't want to say that innovation is a zero-sum game, but isn't there a first mover advantage in terms of these innovation rents from monopoly power on new technologies, and does that affect trade relations in some way? And third, a question which is relevant to both the United States and Europe and the world at large is the problem of the very large increases in both wealth and income inequality, which we have seen since the 1970s. And I know that this is an incredibly controversial issue, and there have been major theories proposed. Some focus on technological change, digital revolution, some focus on globalization. But I also personally encountered the view that a lot of that inequality can be attributed to things like growing monopoly power of established firms, for example, in Thomas Philippen's book, The Great Reversal on the Decline and Degree of Competition in the American Economy, and simply the growth of revenue from established wealth sources. And does that create a question? Does that create a question for policies aimed at addressing inequality? Because obviously some measure of inequality is good and desirable. We want skilled workers to be earning more, significantly more than unskilled workers, because that is an incentive for individuals to acquire education and skills. So this kind of inequality is to some extent something natural and desirable. But if inequality reflects monopoly power, political connections, inherited wealth, is that a problem, and how can that be addressed?
Many questions.
What is
many
exactly the last question you want to ask?
Firstly, is it correct to say that perhaps the causes of inequality are still controversial, and maybe there is a case to be pointed to distinguish between quote-unquote good and bad inequality?
Wow. How many hours do I have? No, let me, inequality is just going to take us completely off. Let me just say 2 things about the, yes, performance is quite uneven within Europe, although you should not, the degree of, particularly if we consider only not the Eastern expansion states, but if we consider consider only the EU as it was before 2004, regional inequality within that zone is not that much greater than regional inequality within the United States. If your idea is that the United States is a level field of high productivity, that's simply not true at all. And substantial parts. I mean, as it turns out, some of the countries that were well behind are actually doing quite well now. Portugal is a good example. I'm losing. Oh, the corporate. About who develops. I mean, I don't want to completely dismiss this, but if we ask the question, you know, is there a problem if an American corporation is developing technology, and who will have access to it? I guess the question there is, what do you mean an American company? This thing, designed in California, manufactured in China, the profits from it somehow end up being registered in Ireland. And it turns out even in the United States, 40% of equities in U.S. headquartered corporations are owned by non-U.S. residents. So I think the idea that we should think of, in many ways, national corporations don't exist anymore. So I'm not sure that that's the issue. If we are thinking about someplace like, well, cases where it's more a strategic issue, where you might be embargoed, where you might be cut off from technology by governments, those are real issues. And both the United States and China play that game, but that's not at all the same thing as just saying it must be national corporations to develop the technology.
I agree. I just want to commend the speaker, the questioner, because I think you raised 3 good questions, and I think Paul tried to respond to it. And again, I'm not worried about rent that are produced, because this will cause innovation, this will lead to more, and you are welcome to invent something that will bring you rent. Microsoft is doing very well, Apple is doing very well. Where is the next corporation in Poland that will do the same? And that's it, that's the whole issue. Again, don't worry. The economy will adapt, and will adapt very quickly. Look at batteries that Paul Krugman mentioned before. Batteries for vehicles, the hydrogen. In the near future, there will be airplanes that are flying with hydrogen. Ships are, now using hydrogen power. Don't worry. We are smart people, all of us, when we work together, rather than imposing, 100% tariff on electric vehicle or solar panels from China.
Yeah, I have the same. I couldn't agree more with Paul Krugman and Yochanan Shachmurove. But at the end, I should add what exactly Yochanan mentioned, that at the end, you need to find someone who finances it. And I'm not think so. I don't think so that it's so easy, to invent something. We should, but at the end we need to find someone who will finance it. Even if we invented, this new technology in a solar system, this company is going to bankrupt after a few years of functioning. So what's going on, why they couldn't find the proper investor? They find it from China. They wanted to buy it with the technology and so on. But they don't want to be a smaller investor at least 1/3 of capacity and capital,
Mm-hmm. If Paul is not saying anything, then I will say the following. Bankruptcies is good. Failing is good. You learn from failures. You learn from going bankrupt. Innovation cannot be, just I win, I will gain, I will gain, I will gain. There will be some positive, there will be negative. I mentioned before that out of 100 startups, only 1 or 2 will succeed. And that's a point.
Thank you. To, co profesor Raczkowski mówił, trudne czasy tworzą
Just like Professor Raczkowski mentioned, tough times make tough people. Well, our time is limited, so please be brief in asking questions.
University of Warsaw and Ambassador of Swedish Polish Chamber of Commerce. Professor Krugman, Professor and Konrad. It's thank you for a remarkable event. So I will have one remark and one question. One remark is that Professor Yochanan told that we seems to be we're opposite side. No, I think as we have the common business, we are not. I'm 1/3 American, 1/3 Lithuanian, 1/3 Polish, so I know what I'm doing, what I'm talking about. And thank you for encouraging us with new ideas of new technologies. But there is one problem with it. We already have solar panels, we have windmills, wind turbines, but we need a backup energy source because when as wind blows, the energy prices are going below zero. So that is our problem. Hydrogen could be next level, yeah, but actually there is no technology on the market what we can adapt right away. Another thing with what Konrad told, yeah, we have a couple of ideas of new green inventions, but mainly most of them are related to reducing human output to environment, but there are some more like cradle-to-cradle idea that produces wealth. It was done also in the Ford motor company. It is successful idea which was already developed, not only idea. And remark to Professor Yochanan research. Thank you very much for pointing our country as such a good example of economic growth, but I think you scratched the surface a little bit, because second level could be to analyze the structure of Polish companies, and it would turn out that we have like 38% of Polish GDP is produced by foreign companies, including German. And talking it to the numbers, it is only 5%, so we don't have too much invention, and with Polish companies that is not a proper level of producing GDP, because like Konrad told, we don't have financial support. Among startup environment, and I can tell you that when startup levels to a certain level, it is bought up by American companies or European companies. Did you analyze in your research also this structure, who owns the Polish companies or not?
I was asking about short questions, please.
So that's on the only one, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
We can talk about it later, but we'll just look at foreign control, if there is a foreign control or not. We are looking further into this situation. I know the concern that you are selling too quickly, and maybe you want to go to production before you sell your product. This is a problem of Israel and other countries that are doing the same. Again, because you don't have the financial background, the financial resources that the United States market and China can provide. I agree with you, but this is, part of the story. You make few people very rich, and you lose the rent in the future. The government can step in, but I don't know if they are willing to do it. Again, it's too risky, so it's an open question.
Okay, my name is Taras Kryvyi. I'm doing PhD at University of Warsaw, and I'm having this topic of my thesis about material intensity of energy transition. So basically, like renewable technologies and also electric vehicles, they require orders of magnitudes more of critical raw materials such as lithium, cobalt, copper, and so on. And as far as we know for now, for example, 60% of refining of world supply of lithium is conducted in China. And we kind of forget, we overlook the point that things are made of other things. And in the face of these geopolitical risks and also kind of financialization of the commodities, what is your perspective on strategy for the EU and for Poland in terms of securing this critical supply of raw materials?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why a simple free trade, go for the least cost source, is not an adequate doctrine right now. The strategic risk has turned out to be very real. My very loose reading is that we keep on discovering new sources of raw materials, but it probably takes subsidies to develop domestic capacity to process those, and it will have to be done. I mean, if you international trade is based originally upon the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is full of all kinds of things that you cannot do, and then there's one article, Article 21, which basically says forget about all of that if national security is at stake. And I think, unfortunately, we are kind of living in an Article 21 world right now.
Well, I agree. I have nothing to add except the fact that the price mechanism will work, the price will go up, and as a result, there will be other alternatives, okay? And sooner than you think, or I think.
But like, for example, Chinese companies, why they are so competitive on solar panels market and also on electric vehicles market is not only the subsidies, but the vertical integration. They control the production of the actual batteries on large scale. And is it viable for us to repeat this strategy? Because
with enough effort and enough money, yes. And unfortunately, we need to do it.
The sooner the better.
Okay. Thanks, Ari. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of nervous. Okay. My name is Thomas Chen. I'm an international economics student at University of Warsaw, and I'm originally from Hong Kong. So I'm recently doing a research about international trade patterns. So I have some relevant question regarding the new green energy cars trade between China and Europe. So that's my main research direction. So I have a question about, because the international trade patterns originated from like Ricardo and Adam Smith, and then to the Hatcher-Olin, and then the Krugman, and now maybe it's more about Mallis. So as we are now in the era of AI and green energy era, so would it change the fundamental setup of the whole international trade patterns, or it's just or not really, or what insights, or like otherwise you guys could give me to like continue this research? That's my question.
I think the rules, the basic principles of international trade change much more slowly than people tend to imagine. I mean, obviously things change, and there's green energy is going to have some major effects on flows of raw materials. And AI, at the moment, I think AI is generating an enormous international trade and hype with not very much substance behind it yet. So, but I don't know. I haven't figured that one out. And I tried asking ChatGPT to tell me the answers, and it gave me basically nonsense. So I don't know.
Okay. First of all, I will encourage you to continue with your research. Don't worry, things will change. Maybe your dissertation will change. As far as the AI, I think it's here and I think it's real. I know that it generates today some nonsense, but eventually it will work and it will be better and better. I recently have a paper that someone did. We looked at different corporations and we just used text analysis and we got good results, and we did it on white goods. White goods are usually dryers and refrigerators and everything that you have in your home. And suddenly we found that management react to different crises in different ways, general models. I did it with someone from the University of Łódź. So it's here and you need to use it. So use it. Look at corporations that are exporting, look at their financial ratios, look at their annual reports, and see what they are doing, how they are investing. I think Mallis is important in this respect because he looked at custom numbers, right? He got the numbers, and he was able to tell you what are the sources of their success or failure. And that's the way you can go to the microdata.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you. Two guys left.
My name is Jan Komorowski, a professor at the Warsaw School of Economics. And I noticed the inflationary aspect that is similar both in Europe and in the US. Of course, we only barely touched on that, but we're talking about an unparalleled increase in financial liquidity. Starting with the subprime crisis in the US, the liquidity rates went up by a factor of 30. With the GDP also growing by some 30%, it's very risky, in particular linked with cryptocurrencies and overestimating of capital valuations of companies as compared to their operational values. What is your perception of this issue? Because it's a real problematic crisis in waiting. Polish people seem to worry too much, like one of the professors rightly observed, but still. And the second question, global finance got really destabilized following quantitative easing. As a finance person, my method is to start analyzing actual, real-world phenomena. Not numbers, but who outputs what in physical goods globally. So my second question is, doesn't it seem that getting away from the classical definition of economy, the ancient Greek definition, to a more monetary policy-related definition that links economic growth with financial capital only, turn out to be too reductionary, meaning we have no ideas as to how to boost actual innovation in the economy? Thanks so much for these beautiful questions.
Okay. The whole liquidity thing is way down on my list of worries. I mean, if there's one thing that central banks know how to do, it is how to tighten financial conditions, as we've just seen in the past year and a half. So I don't think that that's a particular issue. And there's the question of what you include and what you don't include in your liquidity is ultimately unanswerable. There's no one right number. It's all about the results. And the results are that central banks have shown themselves perfectly capable of reining in inflationary pressures. Cryptocurrency is, what can we say? It's worth remembering that Bitcoin is now 15 years old and still has no real-world uses aside from money laundering. So I'm not sure that this is stuff that is terribly important for the economy. On economic, when we measure economic growth, it is not a financial measure. Economic growth is measured, at least in principle, by real output of goods and services. Now, you can question some of the methodology, but the idea that we're dealing with some sort of illusion that's just about money and is not about actual stuff in the world, that's certainly not what Eurostat does. That's not what the Bureau of Economic Analysis in the United States does. They're a lot more sophisticated than that.
Well, I agree with Paul. Liquidity easing causes inflation. Yes, many people have money in their pockets and so on and so on. But in real terms, as you saw, wages in real terms went up. Look at the exchange rate between the Polish currency, the zloty, and the US dollar, which is doing very well. So again, I have a feeling that all of you are feeling like there is danger coming and inflation will kill us and the price of food will be such that we will not be able to afford it. But on the other hand, you look at wages increase. On the other hand, you look that we are going back on inflation targeting. We are getting in the US to 2% or whatever it is, and so on and so on. Don't worry, just, you know, the economy is working. People are innovative, people are adapting. Okay, you can eat less if this is a problem, but you don't need to, because your wages are going up in real terms.
Thank you, Yochanan, for a very positive message that you have sent it to us. I also couldn't agree more what you said. In my opinion, we have little bit problem of liquidity, according that many companies, because banks they were established for something, to, let's say, to give loans for creditors, I mean for entrepreneurs, and you know, to boost the economy and so on, yeah. And now, for example, in the I know that the situation in US is a little bit different, but in Europe as a whole, even in the euro area, we have such a problem with liquidity. Thank you for this question. That a lot of companies couldn't afford to. Are not able to get the loan from the bank. This is the problem. You know, good start on trading and so on, good company functioning, good stability, but for example, not eco, or on the other hand, not enough, let's say, prepared to do this business after, even if this company is functioning on the market for 20, 30 years. So I know this is hard, looking at this sector and looking for the companies. We have small problem. I would say small problem in Europe and Poland as well, with this liquidity, that this capital are not going directly to the companies that it should go.
Dziękuję bardzo i przed nami ostatnie
Thanks so much. And the last question for today, a young person is going to ask.
College London. Based on this panel, I'm under the impression that the European economic growth is pretty comparable to that of the United States. However, the wages in the United States are still substantially higher than those in Europe. How do you see it changing in the next 10 years?
Actually, hourly wages are not substantially higher in the United States than they are in Northwest Europe. Per capita GDP is substantially higher in the United States, or substantially lower in Northwest Europe. But it turns out to be, not entirely, but in very large part, that's because Europeans actually take vacations and Americans don't. It's actually mostly just working hours. Productivity is remarkably similar across the advanced countries. So I mean, the physical standard of living in the United States, material standard of living is higher, but that is largely a choice of working more hours per year. And by the way, so wherever this came up, a 200 square meter apartment in New York costs is out of my reach.
So again, I agree with Paul. I think productivity in France is higher than in the United States. But again, they work less and so on. And I have nothing against it, because maybe the life expectancy as a result is going up. So we need to think about whether we should really work so hard in the United States relative to Europe. Should we learn from Europe, or Europe will learn from us? We need to find a balance, and I think we should find somehow midpoint between the two. Working only 4 days a week maybe is not a good idea. Working 6 or 7 days a week is also not a good idea. So we need somehow to find the balance there.
Yeah, and besides that, we also should increase productivity, you know, in my opinion, because after, you know, aging population in the European Union, still shrinking the economy, I know that this is nominal value, but this is one of the indicator that is common for the IMF or World Bank and so on, and international financial system to compare, yeah? So with such a problems, I should add that in nominal terms, European Union from 2008, it was approximately 90% of US economy. Now it's 65. So we are losing competitiveness. So the only option to be more innovative, to invest in R&D, to prepare something that will be Europeans. Europeans, you know, Europeans something. I don't want to add that company, but something that will give us some the similar situation that we have many times in the long history.
That happens to be the specific number that I hate, because it is really mostly just about the decline of the euro, and not clear what that matters. On a purchasing power parity basis, there's been maybe 10 points of shrinkage, not that much. It's a relative shrinkage. It's just, it's, you know, and currency markets do whatever currency markets do. I don't think that is not a good, I mean, there are plenty of reasons to be concerned about European innovation, growth, and so on, but not the value of the euro against the dollar.
Yes?
No, I agree. That's
okay. Agreement at the end. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Profesor Paul Krugman, profesor Yochanan Shachmurove i profesor Konrad Raczkowski. Bardzo Państwu dziękuję za te brawa dla naszych gości.